Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast. What's new in JD Edwards Enterprise 9.2.3.4 tools release? My name is Amanda Greiner, Marketing Coordinator with GSI, and I'm also very pleased to welcome our main presenter, Bill Rem, our Database Team Manager. Now before we get started, I wanted to give you a chance to review our Safe Harbor statement. And now for a quick overview of today's meeting, which will last about 60 minutes. First, I'd like to take a moment to go over a couple of housekeeping items, as well as provide a brief company overview. Then I'll turn it over to Bill to get into our main presentation, which will last about 40 minutes. Next, I'll take a minute to go over a couple of upcoming educational events, and then we'll wrap it up with a 10-minute Q&A session. If you would like to submit a question, you can do so through the questions panel at the bottom of the GoToWebinar console window located on the right side of your screen. Please note the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, so if you would like to minimize your GoToWebinar console during the presentation, just click the right-facing arrow key on the top left of the console. Clicking the left arrow key will return the console so that you can input your questions. And now I'd like to give you a brief overview of GSI. GSI is a full-service JD Edwards consulting organization. We're an Oracle Platinum partner that was founded in 2004 and now has over 100 employees. We have offices nationwide and are recognized on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in the U.S. GSI specializes in project consulting, managed services, and cloud and hosting services, with all of our services backed with a 100% guarantee. GSI also provides a broad spectrum of business, functional, and technical consulting services for Oracle NetSuite, Oracle Cloud, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and other enterprise applications. In addition, we are a product development company that has many popular products, including Genius, which is our advanced monitoring and performance analytics solution for JD Edwards or any business critical system on any platform. Genesis is our load and stress testing application for system design, validation, or expansion for JD Edwards or any web-based business critical system. G-Shield is our comprehensive security solution for JD Edwards, including password reset and two-factor authentication. Rapid Reconciler, which allows you to effectively manage your inventory, in-transit, and R&B reconciliation processes for any version of E1 or World. And Rapid Approval is a Salesforce AppExchange solution that streamlines the approval request process. All right, now I'd like to turn things over to Bill to get into our main presentation.
All righty, I'm going to change presenter here, find the correct monitor on my screen. There we go. Let me know when you can see that.
All right, I can see it.
All right. So yes, I am Bill Rem, the Database Team Manager, broadcasting live from the Database World Headquarters for GSI in Austin, Texas. Some of you may be wondering, why is Database Guy doing a tools release webcast? Some of you may not care, but the answer is because I am also a CNC. I started at JD Edwards in 1998 and have been working on managed services and in the field ever since then, doing CNC stuff. So let's get started and talk about the new tools release. So the title here says 9.2.3.5, which may be slightly confusing because we said this was 9.2.3.4, but the new tools release came out this week. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it at the end. As with the other webcast about tools release, we kind of go into a review of where we are with 9.2. There are a lot of clients who have not gone to 9.2 yet and may be thinking about what reasons should I go there, and simply talking about what's in the latest iteration of the tools release is probably not going to be convincing enough. So take a look in the beginning of 9.2, they introduced a web-based OMW. You can't do everything that you could do with the regular OMW, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. They introduced AIS and also the simplified upgrade. Start getting into the iterative tools releases. We got the Orchestrator Studio in 9.2.02. We got a watch list pane for compose pages and some new grid formats, list view grid formats. Moving on to 9.2.1, we had this is when UX1 started coming in, role-based landing pages based on the alert, analyze, act design paradigm. There's a modernized graphical user interface. You get a lot of stuff at a glance. Form personalization for citizen developers, so you can make dynamic interface changes. Cafe One composite applications to bring together related information for a simplified user experience. Templates, also templates and utilities to help you create your own analytics, and data grouping for aggregations, including currency conversions. Plus, you have springboards to place key tasks in a composed page. And you can navigate from charts to applications to help you drill down into data and some better things to do with context menus. We talked about the personal forms. This allows you to implement specific user interface changes without having to go through the form design aid. There's some enhancements to the server manager, of course. When you're using the simplified upgrade, there's a little bit, it makes it a little bit more simple, and the introduction of notifications with 9.2.2.2. And these all kind of came in through 9.2.2.0 through 9.2.2.2, just generally, but more specifically in 9.2.2.1, they changed the package build process. Now you can, this is when objects are now being stored in the database. It actually started with 9.2.1.4, but it changed, it was enhanced in 9.2.2.1. SSL and TLS support. You can, and media objects, not just, so the first one is about objects like your code. And then this one here, media objects, is different. Those are being uploaded to the database now too. And I'll go into a little more detail in that in the later on in this webcast. So basically, you're taking all the file storage and putting it in the database, including media objects and the print queue files, PDFs, and the code itself, instead of having it in a cab file on the deployment server or in files on a file server. It's now all being consolidated in one place. And there's some other options with that too. There's also some new platform certifications as the new versions of operating system databases come out. Those we had some new ones come in 9.2.2.1. And we're able to then Change Assistant 4.0.0.4 came out in 9.2.2.1 to help you stay code current. Also, a few other things. We got single sign-on with the Oracle Content and Experience Cloud. There's a new subscription manager, which allows you to receive updates via email or SMS, or as a browser pop-up from Workcenter. The database connector for orchestrations is so you can read and write to a non-JD Edwards database using SQL, and then do the dataset processing on that stuff. The OAuth 2.0 came out for REST connections. There's a new Java API that came out. Business function tracking now, and if you're familiar with object usage tracking in OMW, they finally enabled business function tracking there. In 9.2.2.2, the designer pane of a composed page, you cut, copy, and paste. There's troubleshooting information for the search feature, and AES needs a security server. It was formerly optional, but now it is required. Moving on to 9.2.2.4, 9.2.2.4, 9.2.2.5, and 6, and 9.2.3.0, you can view and in some cases modify or opt out of subscriptions that have been assigned to you. And we also have a few other enhancements related to applications, like adding business views, exit personalization, grid label personalizations. You can assign subscriptions to specific people. And there's some Orchestrator 6.1 enhancements. As you can see, confirm completion, process reorder, and launch UBE as a step. More things that have come up. Form extensions are in 9.2.2.4 are a new object that lets users add the business view columns to the forms, E1 forms, and it's been enhanced to enable users to hide, unhide, and rename menu exits. Grid personalization was enhanced to enable users to rename grid column headers in the list view and the table view grid format. And they put in some new delivered notification content. There's also the P980053X, so you can assign subscriptions to people, as we mentioned in the previous slide. That's the application you use. Scheduler resilience enables you to store the scheduled job properties for notifications and the orchestrations, they all go into the database. And all notifications were improved performance-wise overall. 9.2.2.5 was just a bug fix release, not really a whole lot to say there. Then we moved on to 9.2.2.6 from November 2017, enhancements to UX1, EnterpriseOne Search. They updated the 9.2.2.6 trial edition on the Oracle Public Cloud. There's also mobile applications that were enhanced, a new sales order management order guides, and health and safety updates, the specifics of which you can find in the details of the notes for this webcast, which you will get later on. In general, for 9.2.x, there's new UDCs delivered for composed pages, personal forms. It's a new image icon UDCs, search groups, and orchestrations notifications. Now we're moving on to more general updates in 9.2.2.2 and 9.2.3.x. They are going to be very similar to some of the things that you saw here, but since they span a couple different tools releases, I wanted to point these out a little bit more generally. So we mentioned the personal forms. There's the new user-defined objects. The improvements to media object attachments is very nice, especially when you're storing them on the database. UX1 pages have been improved, and they've created new ones. It's much easier to deliver, to deploy and configure UX1 content, and you can work with development samples and work in a local development content environment to test that content and learn about customizing that content using Oracle Jet. Mention external forms. That allows you to connect to external applications like ADF, Jet, composed E1 pages. And they can be used for embedded forms in the Cafe One layout. Menu indexing, that identifies a task that can be displayed and accessed by a role from the Springboard pane of the composed E1 page. Pop-up interconnections are similar to a modal interconnection, that it enables the user to only work on one form at a time, basically. However, the child form still appears. It appears in a pop-up window, so the parent form is still visible behind it, which gives you some context. Also, we talked about the Power Browse as a hover form. This improvement over the previous method of creating hover forms from message forms. It includes 4 new system functions, which are described in the System Functions and Form Design Aid appendix. And finally, the Universal Cache Browser, finally for this slide, that is. The Universal Cache Browser utility, it enables you to view the cache details of any transaction, even before they are committed to the tables. More new things for 9.2.2.x, 9.2.2.x, and 9.2.3.x. We have the Work Center Cafe One application is now role-based. Internet of Things, orchestration components. There's more AIS server capability and services, it allows you to work with queries better, data aggregations, user preferences, and optimizing service request processing, also called turbo mode. You can change the amount of records that you can specify the maximum amount of records you can return on an AIS application. So you can limit them or tell it to retrieve all of them or whatever works for your system. There's active content pages. It's a new kind of a classic E1 page that contain Oracle Jet, which is JavaScript extension toolkit, the Oracle Jet library, and it's a prerequisite to supporting active content pages is to update Server Manager. And there's some more detail about that in the notes. And you can also configure JDE mobile application archives, and that enables developers to create a custom mobile application from an existing EnterpriseOne mobile enterprise application, and that works with the Oracle Mobile Cloud Service. And that's a cloud-based service that gives you a unified hub for developing, deploying, maintaining, monitoring, and analyzing your mobile applications and the resources that they rely on. You also get some new EnterpriseOne Search. You can use it on iPad and through browsers for Android and iOS. The Orchestrator was enhanced to use Groovy scripting for orchestration rules. It's also been enhanced to enable REST calls to external systems. And the orchestrator stays pretty simple. By including Groovy and REST, it expands the capability of it to people who really like more detail and more functionality. The licensing, so Orchestrator used to be called Internet of Things Orchestrator. That's changed. So it's not being licensed as a discrete product. It's actually included as part of the EnterpriseOne core tools and infrastructure. So everybody gets it, and everyone's happy, I hope. As with every recent release, UX1 got some analytic components enhanced so that the end users don't have to wait for charts to refresh every time they're displayed. Now you have in batch load confirm, you have the ability to confirm transportation loads. Expense entry is enhanced by displaying the expense category and location descriptions. New form layouts for service management, simplified form layouts for capital asset management and project costing. Job master revisions now includes the owner address in the grid. The contract master was enhanced in contract and service building. The business process models were updated for 9.2 along with some localization updates. And then in the Oracle Content and Experience Cloud, you can now access contextual documents and user documents, which that are not related to E1 transactions. Now we're getting into specific to 9.2.3.0, which was released almost a year ago. They did expect that at Open World last year, but it was delayed, and that's when we got 64-bit support and Visual Studio 2017. And then we also have multi-foundation support, and the notifications now can be monitored with the application there you see is P980060X, and that's the orchestrator monitor, and it lets you perform a health check of your notifications in your orchestrator environment. It lets you know which notifications are performing well and which ones might need fine-tuning, as well as details about any exceptions, so you can take corrective actions to resolve issues. And you can get more information on that in the Orchestrator Health and Exception Monitoring section in the Tools Orchestrator Guide, which I have a link to in the notes. 9.2.3.1, don't know where that went, packed up and went away before we could meet it, so we went straight to 9.2.3.2. There's some new data packs for UX1. There's over 100 available at this point. And you can also configure EnterpriseOne HTML server for the JSON Web Token. Oracle introduced support for Orchestrator 7.1.0.0, and in there you can add multiple actions such as application shortcuts to a notification message. They can also specify a personal form, query, or watch list to use when opening the application. And they can define the pretext and post-text to use with the link text in the message. There's variable inputs now for orchestrations and special values for dates in a data request. Then there's 9.2.3.3. There's a new application called Category Manager, which enables you to add categories to subscriptions. So when you add a new subscription, a drop-down list of categories is available, and you can make any new category you add to your subscription available for others to use by clicking the Share button. You can use the search field to filter your notifications and subscriptions in Subscription Manager, and you can use the Show field to filter the subscriptions further. Now, notification designers, when you're making your notification, you can add links to the notifications and orchestrations, URLs, E1 reports, and BI Publisher reports to notification messages, and these can be accessed from the message center, from email, and the notifications list. They've also started supporting Open Standards 2.0 for orchestrations, version 3, and XML formatting for orchestrations. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, Orchestrator 7.2.0.0. We mentioned the set record fetch size in the previous summary and the message center on the iPad, but you can also now use an SSH key to connect for the soft coding record on an FTP server connection. The extensibility updates, which I mentioned before, you can add unused table columns that are associated with the business view. You can associate orchestrations with events. The E1D Customizer Analysis Report lets you identify the UI customizations to applications that can be replaced using the personalization and the extensibility framework. And finally, Oracle Access Manager 12.2.1.3 and Oracle Internet Directory 12.2.1.3 are now supported. User experience updates, and this is going to be kind of a general overview of the experience updates throughout the 9.2 tools release. You can get multiple actions and messages, work center messages, orchestrator messages. Notifications allow an action, a link, and things, and sometimes users need to make a choice among multiple actions, so messages allow that. The messages and notifications are really powerful ways to alert users to the critical events and give them fast access to the applications they need to respond to that message. Sometimes the information in the message is not enough and you need to provide an attachment to the message, like a document or a picture or a file, to fully complete that process. In UDO management, you are able to look up and view the user-defined object dependencies. So you can scan and retrieve and store those dependencies for the composite pages. Inquire on the UDO view security records. You can copy those records from one role to another. And you can, using WebOMW, you can add new or existing UDOs to an OMW project and copy an OMW project that contains UDOs, which you couldn't do before. The framework, we talked about the form extensibility, same things as before. Basically, as the more the forms are the extensibility is increased, it gives users the ability to change and modify forms so that they make more sense for them and are easier to use based on your workload. And there's a new My Work List pane, which I'll show you in just a second. And I talked about the alert, analyze, act paradigm. It takes your choice of watch lists and a notification list and other information that will keep you alert and on task for whatever your critical activities are. And this is what that looks like here. I don't know if it's blurry or not, but it looks good for me. This is kind of what that looks like. You can see on the left side it shows the some of the notifications, and then in the middle is the message center, and on the right is a health monitor to show the different parts of whatever your workflow is. And now let's talk a little bit about notifications. They obviously notify you what's going on. It just basically, it gives you the information from a watch list, like the total number of records or the number of records exceeding a warning or a critical threshold. It can also be based on orchestrations, including information like data requests and form requests. There are simple notifications, which is like a text message. Doesn't do any processing, doesn't return any data. So it's like a little email with a subject and body, and it's it's really simple there, but they can get even much more complicated. Now these notifications have all the security and management of other user-defined objects, and they're managed in that way. And as designers create and modify these notifications and orchestrations using the Studio, it automatically stores those in the UDO repository, and they execute on the AIS server. And the Studio also automatically deploys the object to the AIS server where they're cached. When you design a notification, use Orchestration Studio. I'll show you that on the next screen, where you design, test, and deploy. It requires an Oracle Application Development Framework, ADF, and it also needs its own WebLogic server and an ADF runtime. There are step-by-step instructions on how to create this notifications and schedule them in the JD Tools Notifications Guide, but I'll show you a screenshot here in a little bit. Now there's different ways to deliver it. You can deliver these notifications. It can be done through a notification bell within the application. They can come in the Work Center or by email or text message. And they can be notified about business events when they're on the move or just not logged into JD Edwards with those types of notifications. And they can be configured for individual users through the My Subscriptions application. So this is the designing a notification screen. You come in here and you can see just on the screen we've got notifications. It's got instructions on how to. You just got to click the thing here and it'll tell you how to do it. Walks you through the rules and cross references and this. So this, if you're going to be designing notifications, this is your home screen that you'll drop into. If you look in here, this is what actual notifications look like. This is a little bit better screen than the other one before, a little clearer. So these notifications, if you recall from previously, these were introduced in 9.2.2.1, enhanced in 9.2.2.6, and they continue to get enhancements through the recent tools releases. There's an Oracle white paper on notifications, which breaks down everything you need to know about it. So we mentioned the text ones, and when you design the notifications, and so if we look at this one here where you have the release backorder sales, you can take and create graphs and charts and everything based on the information in your database, and then create like a panel just to see how things are moving through your system and get an idea for how your data is being used. It's kind of a great data analytics tool, good dashboard for managers and the C-levels. But and you can design these in any way you want to any specific business need. Now the notifications, obviously, they are as you happen. You can get them online or offline, whether you use text messages or JDE things. Your users can opt in and out for these methods. And you can also force people to get these notifications. These are all set up through the subscription manager. You have to turn on the notifications feature in order for you to get notifications. You have to enable view security for them. Then if you're using email delivery, you have to set up your mail preferences, whether it's external or through the Work Center. So this is all done in the subscription manager. If you want to allow a user to select email as a delivery option, the sysadmin has to enable that setting in the notifications section in Server Manager. And all this is described in detail in the E1 Tools Notification Guide. Now let's talk about object usage tracking. This is kind of cool. It's a big deal. For a long time, people wanted to have this, but in a nutshell, this allows you to see what objects are being accessed, who accessed them, when was it the busiest, if your customizations are being used or not, if you're going to put in some patching or an update or an ESU, how is that going to affect the work that you're doing? Is it going to cause a performance issue? And plus, I think it's great that you are able to see what objects are people using. That's one of my favorite parts. This is also great for license compliance. If you have paid for a whole bunch of modules and you look in your object tracking and find out that, well, hey, I don't ever use this whole module, why am I paying for that? This will help you out. And the secondary one that I like is that it helps you map out the busy times. So take a look at this here. This is an example here. So here's a usage count. On the top left, it shows the P4210 as the most used application in DV and PY. You also see the daily peak usage time for both environments. There's object usage by path code, and this is just an example of what you can do with this application. So if you have, using this data, having this information about what's the busiest and when things are going the fastest can really help out with, maybe how you architect your system. You could shift processing of specific applications to go to one server, or if you have the ability to do dynamic load shifting in your data center or the cloud, you can see on the top right slide, that from basically midnight to 4 a.m., there's very, very little activity going on. And if that was something that repeated, that was consistent, you might be able to dial back your CPUs and memory quite a bit during those times, and then come around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you bounce that stuff up. And this is the kind of information that this can give you. Now let's talk real quickly about database. I mentioned moving objects to the database, spec objects, print objects, and media objects. The concept behind this is that when you have these objects in multiple locations on a enterprise system, it becomes difficult to manage disaster recovery because you have to have multiple file systems protected by something, whether it's a snapshot or you're copying it off to somewhere else, and it's not really connected in any way to how your data is being protected. So by moving all these to the database, it has a bunch of benefits, which is coming up in another slide. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So moving spec objects in the database, these are objects associated. They're like business functions, business views, UBEs, tables, etc. It's just a one-time process to put it into the database. They're not needed in the file system anymore. The system looks at the database whenever one of these objects is used. Now, as I mentioned, there are some benefits. It simplifies and reduces the risk. Your backup and recovery is now handled by the database. And since you can restore your data at a point in time, not only does your data show up, but the objects it was using are now in complete sync with your data. And it really helps when migrating to the cloud. You just migrate the database and not have to worry about missing any of the spec objects or not copying your deployment server directories correctly. And there's a history archive too. You capture info every time an object is changed, and you can find objects as the cross-path codes and export them as a PAR file still, like you used to be able to export them through OMW. Now you can still do it from the database. Media objects are also going to be stored in the database. So in the FO165 still exists, and the F98 MOQ still exists, but there's a new table called F98 MODAT. So when you decide to go to 9.2, your new media objects will be stored in the database. Your old media objects will still stay in the file system until you convert them to the database. And so what you're having is there's still a reference inside the MOQ table, which points to wherever that thing is. So from the perspective of a user, they're not going to know that a media object came from a file system or the database. But once you run the R98 MODAT UBE to move everything to the database, you can't go back. It's all in there now. All of your media objects that you convert will now be in the database. Now, if you have some kind of third-party thing that automatically creates your queues for you and puts files in that are referenced by some other process that inserts it into your FO165 table, it's still going to show up. So if you have some kind of hybrid system where you create media object externally, it'll still work. And you can run that R98 MODAT to convert that stuff to the database on a regular basis. So it'll still work even if you have some kind of multi-step custom thing going on. Now, print queue objects are going to the database too. I mean, that's where we want them to go. It lets you have more flexibility with your batch queues, even especially with large volumes. You can deliver these the output to the database or to the file system, or both if you wish. And this can be done at runtime or as part of the application, the UBE development. So if you have an application that requires you to drop a CSV into a file system, that's fine. You can still do that. You just update your application to also produce a file. So why would you want to move to the database? Now, if you're a database administrator like me, I say, why not? We want to control the world. But the real reasons are because remote package builds and mobile package builds are a lot easier because you don't have to pull stuff from multiple locations. It shortens the time to deployment of of these things. It allows you to have multiple versions of the same objects much easier, and you can decide at runtime which version to execute. You also stay current at the fraction of the cost. And this kind of goes more into how databases function. Like if you, for example, if you have Enterprise Edition SQL Server, for example, or Oracle, some of you may be thinking, well, if I have a terabyte of media objects and we really only access, this many, and I don't want to put it all in SSDs or something like that. The cool thing is you can use table partitioning to put your most often access objects onto your solid state drives. And then anything else you don't have, you can put that on a separate set of partitions, which can be managed separately, and put them on slower disk. And with media objects especially, or any of these, now it's easier to have multiple tables that have information for different environments or even different departments, however you want to do it. So if you have architecture changes, when you update the database, that's going to be a lot easier to get everything done, because usually database is more transparent to how file system, whatever operating system it's on. The management overhead goes down because now you don't have production data on non-production servers. So like the media objects, for example, most people put their media objects on the deployment server, and often that is not considered a production server, so it's not backed up the same way. So you have to have multiple people watching all these things. So if you just have the database administrator watching all of it, then you have less eyes having to go everywhere else. And transporting data when it's in 10 different locations or 3 different locations is more complex. Especially if you're moving on-prem to the cloud, it's much easier to do that by just sending the database up. In Azure and OCI and AWS, they have the wizards you can use to just migrate the database without any problem, and you would not have to worry about the other file systems. And process to back up and restore, not just in the cloud but everywhere. It's a lot easier because, as I mentioned before, all of the files are in sync. They're all point in time, and they're all related to each other at exactly the same time. And here's one of the real, probably best reason, is that having everything in the database is a key part of future changes to JD Edwards. The way that the JDE is going to work in the near future is that you're going to probably not work as well or not have as good a performance unless everything's in the database. And I guess this is also pretty important, which is security. When you have these files in multiple locations, they have to be managed separately, not just as where their physical location is, but also their security. When you use the database, you can have one type of security and rely on transparent data encryption, and encrypt your data at rest and data in motion, and it would include your media objects and the print queue stuff. So let's go to one more note here on 9.2.3x, just in general, recent information about how long things take: 8 to 12 hours for a server build and 4 hours for the first client build. And after that, they take about an hour after the first one. You got to have a planner ESU. There's a roll-up ESU. There's an ASI. There are a lot of dependencies, obviously, all the time. Our CNCs here have run into a lot of issues with ESUs that are missing from these roll-ups and things like that. So be very careful when you search for this stuff. Go through more than just what Change Assistant tells you, because it's very common to not see things in there that should be there. I mentioned earlier there's a new Change Assistant, and update 3 is now available. I don't know how many people know or don't know about 64-bit with JD Edwards, but that was just announced. They announced that they were going to have we're going to support 64-bit hardware operating systems, databases, and middleware, and now they're finally doing it. it's pretty new. There are a lot of clients who are starting to move to it, but it lets you adapt to it lets you future-proof your environments. If you don't move to 64-bit, you'll probably be facing hardware obsolescence quicker than staying on 32-bit. A lot of third-party vendors only have 64-bit components, and they may in the future just end or not support very well 32-bit. And it lets JD Edwards, it lets Oracle deliver better, newer versions of the required technology stack. And there's really no impact to your business processes or business data. Transitioning to 64-bit is a technical uplift that's managed with the JDE Tools Foundation. We have done it very successfully. We've got a well-tested process to get people up there. The real risk to any of it is really just staying with 32-bit. But it's not mandatory. You don't have to go to 64-bit yet. So this works with Enterprise Server and Development Client. JD Edwards has supported the hardware itself forever. It's just the software wasn't. As I mentioned before, the main reason we're doing this is not the main reason, but one of the reasons we're doing it is the third-party people are all going towards 64-bit as well. Although we give you the choice to stay on it, you might have to convert some of the custom business functions if you are on 64. If you move to 64-bit, this would only be, like I said, just for the custom ones. It's not that well. I don't know. I'm not a developer anymore, but the 64-bit conversion utility, there is a conversion utility that will help you convert your custom business functions to 64-bit. So got that there for you. The performance boost, they say in testing that it's gone up to 10% for applications, UBEs 13%, but it really, your mileage may vary. Anytime you talk about performance, it may be better, it may not be as good, but there definitely is some performance benefit. Now we're getting to 9.2.3.4, getting close to the latest tools release. Now Orchestrator 7.3 is supported. This is a big release for techies. I recommend you click on that link and read about it. Form extensibility is getting even better. Now when you associate orchestrations with events on an E1 form using the form extensibility framework, you can map the orchestration output parameters to the form controls. There's also scheduler service REST endpoints as of 9.2.3.4. The REST APIs for the AIS server include additional services for administering multiple schedulers and for scheduling orchestrations and notifications. And the new REST API Clear Data Cache will allow you to clear the cache via AIS and HTML. You can also launch notification and orchestration links from EnterpriseOne for iPad. The collect and generate diagnostics lets you automatically collect all this information, system information, and it can pertain to a specific server or all servers, whichever you like. You can also include an object as an orchestration input type, which lets you pass a JSON object into an orchestration. Now you use this input type to pass nested arrays of data by defining arrays of objects. And you can use the allow input JSON object toggle to map a JSON object to the connector. And this allows you to pass arrays to an orchestration that is called through a connector. There's some dev and functional improvements in 9.2.3.4. But mainly it is related to mobile applications enhancements and the interface. But the details about all that is available online. Now the UX1, there are a lot of improvements. As I mentioned before, there's over 32 UX1 roles. The role-based application content is a big deal. Watch lists for the alerts and the data visualizations that we saw, and you saw an example of some of those in the notifications. These datas and charts are much more intuitive and characteristic in nature. The springboards let you quickly launch tasks like applications, batch programs, ADF applications, and the personal forms feature has been enhanced to let people optimize their own personal experience. And now, introduced this week, Tools 9.2.3.5. I don't have a whole lot of information on this. I was studying up on this before the webcast today. Found a lot of bug fixes. I pasted in the top bug fixes into the notes for you to check out. But some of them are related to workflow kernels going zombie. If you send a message without a shortcut URL, it gets stuck. There's another problem with Groovy attributes are not writing to the AAS logs. Grids can flicker on Mac devices. And Orchestrator client health check could fail on AS400 web server AIS, and a few others. I got about 10 or 12 in there. One funny one here is run UBXML fails with processing options and report interconnects longer than 256 characters. I don't know how many people had that problem, but that's fixed in this one. If we find out any more information about 9.2.3.5, for me, this is kind of hot off the presses. So, by the time we do our next webcast, we'll learn a little bit more. All right, guys, enough of that citizen developer stuff. That's basically what orchestrations do, is let everybody become a developer, and I hope that it all is working out for you. If you haven't moved to 9.2 yet, you're still on 9.1 or previous, I hope this gave you a lot of great information about what to expect when you move forward. And that's all from here in Austin, Texas. It was great talking to everybody. Amanda, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil. Okay. Our webcast today is a part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards. Our upcoming webcasts are listed on the screen, but if you would like to view our most up-to-date schedule, you can go to getgsi.com/JD-Edwards-webcast. GSI provides extensive free educational resources for the JD Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcasts, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, our online resource center where you can access our on-demand webcasts, white papers, etc., and our on-site and virtual workshops. If you would like to sign up for weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts, our monthly newsletter, or if you want to create an account to access our resource center, you can go to getgsi.com, go to resources and events on the main menu, click JD Edwards, and then select the appropriate link on the right. So it looks like I don't see any questions at the moment. However, if anybody does come up with any questions, feel free to reach out to either Bill or myself. Our contact information is on the screen, and we will answer your questions as soon as possible. And as a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit. You'll be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we'll do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone who attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. Thanks again for attending our presentation, and we hope you have a great day.